On LA Currents, we sit down with a profoundly impressive woman who has made it her personal mission to ensure that every woman walking out of prison has a new way of life. Up next, an expert whose job it is to visually recognize seismic safety features of all LA buildings. He offers some very useful information on structure and the possible big one. But first, Mayor Garcetti referred to her as the right leader at the right moment. I talk with the General Manager of the Economic and Workforce Development Department of Los Angeles, Carolyn Hull.
We were not built to do $11 million in loans within like 2 months. We were not built to do $100 million in grants. We have shifted our energy to make sure that we can expeditiously get money out the door because people are suffering now. So we've worked quite tirelessly to get a significant amount of money onto the streets.
COVID-19 brought with it an enormous amount of disruptions and questions. But when it comes to employment opportunities, fortunately, Los Angeles has a resource for some really good answers. I'm delighted to welcome to LA Currents Carolyn Hull, the General Manager of the Economic Workforce Development Department. So nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
In terms of what your office is hearing, what are the businesses that you've heard most from and have been mostly impacted by COVID-19 in Los Angeles?
Well, it's really had a very heavy hit on the accommodation, the hotel, in the motel, tourist industries, the airline industry. We've been working very closely with the organizations and companies at LAX, restaurants, services. Those are the types of industries. Small businesses in general have been really heavily impacted by COVID-19. But those industries that are associated with the arts and entertainment and anything to do with tourism have really had a very difficult time.
And what can you tell them? What can you offer them? Because you're right, there's this ripple effect that's taking place. I mean, you said the airline industry, I immediately think of, that means everybody that's handling luggage and all the restaurants and all the custodial and everything. So what can you offer them? What kind of advice can be provided in this time?
Well, we have several sources that we can provide. First of all, we have our work source centers, which allow individuals to go and virtually meet with individuals right now to talk about their skill sets and to talk about employment that's currently out there, because there are organizations and companies that are growing. And when you work with our work source center, they help you with resume building, or sometimes there's an opportunity just to retrain. There are numerous programs through our community colleges and other organizations where we do workforce training. Also, we also provide them services in just understanding how to fill out the unemployment benefits. That is really difficult. We're not the entity that actually executes it,
right,
but we are the group that can sit down and help you understand where to get health insurance, how to fill out the unemployment benefits package, and really be there for support in terms of maybe helping individuals understand what child care is available, because oftentimes, particularly for women, child care is a really big issue. You couldn't even go back into the workforce unless there's child care available.
The thing that you said that I found was interesting, that there are employment opportunities out there. You would think with the downturn in the economy and with all of these restrictions and limitations that there would not be jobs, but on your site I saw there was a pretty substantive list of jobs.
Oh, absolutely. There are a substantive list of jobs, as you've indicated. The construction industry has not slowed down. In fact, in many areas it's picked up. Logistics and package delivery. There's been certain sectors that are actually trying to accommodate those of us who are, really much spending a significant amount of time home. And so when you go to our work source centers or to our portals, you'll see that there are numerous opportunities available in some of these industries.
You have so many different relationships and so many, arenas in terms of workforce development and business assistance and everything. You have a community portal.
Yeah.
What does the community portal provide?
The LA portal is a place where you could go and it connects you and gives you information about jobs that are available. On our website, we actually have resources available and toolkits that tell businesses about how to approach some of these deadlines that are coming up, how to help them market in times of, in these difficult times. So the community portal provides that information.
You also have safety, of businesses that are trying to make sure that if they are open, that they are doing it in a safe and healthy. And so you also have an opportunity for people to learn all those safety protocols as well.
That's right. We absolutely do. We've and in fact, we have been at the front line of giving out the PPE to businesses and families through our family source centers and our youth source centers as well. And we have been working with organizations to talk to them and give them information about how to proceed in these difficult times and safety protocols.
In your background, you have a pretty substantive background in community, in public-private partnerships and how important they are. How important has that been to the City of Los Angeles in this regard, especially in particular with economic workforce development?
It's been critical. Government cannot do it alone. The private sector can't do it alone. I think the LA COVID Regional Fund is a great example of government, the city and the county, working with the nonprofit, the local initiative support corporation, and getting philanthropic dollars to also leverage that so that we could actually get the type of money that I'm talking about onto the streets, $100 million. And in understanding what businesses need, it's really important for us to work with organizations like the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation, the various chambers, so we understand the challenges that businesses are facing and how we as a team can work together to get that information out there.
You have a pretty strong economic workforce development background. I mean, your personal background in, real estate consulting and the different arenas in which you have your degrees, it seems as if you were meant for this position at this moment in time, because you had to think innovatively in your previous places and also in your education.
What's interesting, my first day in this new position was probably mid-January 2020.
3 months into the gig, and look what you get.
Yeah, about 2 months in. It was late January, and the pandemic, I think the emergency orders came out March 17th.
Right.
So immediately going into that, but it seems like I was built for it, oddly enough, because I had recently been the Vice President of Industry Cluster Development and Strategic Initiatives at the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation, where we put together, analyses on growth industries and how to put together apprenticeships and looking at some of these issues that were now put into place immediately when I started this position.
The issue of real estate and just even utilizing real estate as a economic mechanism and moving forward, we're going to have to deal with some pretty interesting changes and thoughts about where people are working and whether real estate is going to be a place that has value because, will the offices go back to the way they were and all those kinds of things.
Oh, absolutely. The real estate markets now and you mentioned that the office market is very unclear about what the demand for office space will be. It has changed. People have now realized, particularly in government, for example, that you can actually work remotely. And I know that there's some benefits to doing that. And so as we look at the shifting real estate markets, we're going to take into consideration those growth industries of the future. Office space is really tied to what the demand is for specific industries. And there are certain industries now for which Los Angeles and Los Angeles County has a competitive advantage, or it's an emerging market, like bioscience, for example, medical office facilities. Those will be in demand. So the important thing for us and for me in my position is to look at what those growth industries are, not just from a real estate perspective, but from a workforce perspective, because we want to marry that demand for space, physical space, with the skill sets, the middle skill occupations, so that we can provide those businesses with the workforce that they need, that's trained for the skills of the 21st century.
If people want to find out more, and if people have some questions, and if people want some information, where can they find all of this?
The best place for them to go is to go to our website, which is EWDDLAcity.com.
And it was great talking to you.
Great talking to you as well.
Thanks.
Take care.
Susan Burton is a social justice activist, author, and once an inmate herself, with a successful nonprofit organization whose doors are open to support women and their reentry into society.
It was 1981. I worked part-time with a realtor. I had a 5-year-old son, and one day he got hit by a car, and it killed him. I lost him and my world shattered. Eventually, I started using drugs, and along with that came imprisonment. I returned to prison over and over and over again.
After years of heartache and tragedy and substance abuse, Susan Burton turned her life around. But that wasn't enough. She turned back around and extended her hand to women just like her to help them as well. And a new way of life was born. I am so delighted to have you with us today. So wonderful to have you. Susan Burton, a New Way of Life founder. All right, I gave the very, very, very short encapsulated version of the struggles that you went through, but they were rather profound.
They were quite profound. Driving over today, I crossed the bridge where I was born and where I played as a little girl and where I was harmed as a little girl. The experiences were quite profound, but by grace, by mercy, by determination, I'm sitting with you here today.
Yes. You were incarcerated 6 times due
Yes.
to things that you had done because of substance abuse, dealing with the pain that you were going through.
Yeah.
That's a lot of incarceration. Did it just become a pattern? Did it just become an area of comfort, or were you just getting caught all the time?
I feel my incarceration was the effects of our society not being willing or able to deal with substance use, with the drug problems in our nation, and an intolerance for things that society if it didn't fit, then we'll just lock it up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so, it did become, for me, a sort of hopeless cycle of in and out, in and out, in and out, and asking for help, not knowing what type of help I needed, but asking for help, and the courts just wouldn't give me help.
And finally that help did come, however.
It did.
And that was the turning point.
It did. I found a drug treatment facility in Santa Monica, in a community that was resourced like no other community that I'd ever seen.
Right.
I found compassion, I found patience, I found love, I found resources, I found safety, I found all the things that I needed to set a different direction for my life.
And in a mere year later, and we think about how fast a year can go by.
Yeah.
You had a home, but you didn't just stay safe by yourself. You went down to the bus stop where incarcerated women are released, and you offered them a place to live.
Yes.
What moment in your heart, and when you were, how did you make that decision? Because that's a decision. It's hard enough to care for yourself when you've experienced what you've experienced and you're on a very, a new road. But to turn around and go back down there and say, please, I'm here, come with me.
Yeah, sometimes there's things in life that you just must do. And when I found the help in Santa Monica and reflected on the lack of support and help in South LA. First, I felt, really, really fortunate. But then I said I found a way out. I found a solution. And there were so many of us that were just trying to make a way out of no way. You get out of prison, you get off a bus downtown Skid Row, you've been tortured for the last year, 2 years, been oppressed, suppressed, and subject to all types of things. And then one day you put on a bus and you're sent back to town with $200, no ID, no social security card. One day, all the choices are given back to you and you have no direction. And just that 3 months of support in Santa Monica changed the whole direction and trajectory for my life. And I thought if I could recreate what I had gotten in Santa Monica, in South LA, then there would be so many women that would just be so much better off. So we actually created a community of women who were just thriving and supporting one another.
All right, so here we are,
Yes.
as I said, almost 25 years later. And what is still the same with A New Way of Life in terms of your original intent and what you do, and what is expanded? Because it is exploded.
Yes, it has. So what has stayed the same is that we have a kind, loving, comfortable environment for women to come to when they're released from prison. A place for them, a place for their children. But now we have social workers in place. We have a therapist on staff. We have attorneys to help them to get their children back. Mm-hmm. We have a legal department. We have leadership development, because I believe that when what all that the women have been through, you go through that, you have some leadership skills. Definitely. And so we support them to become leaders of their community, leaders of their household, leaders, and use their voice for good, use their vote for good. So we have 10 homes now. Over 1,200 women have been through our homes. We actually opened 2 more homes during the pandemic.
I was going to ask, because there's been a lot of prisoner release during the pandemic in order to, sort of keep the whole thing at bay so it didn't actually spread through the jails and the prisons. How much more need has there been?
I mean, there's a great need for housing, for reentry, for housing, period. Sure. in our county, across our state. But the reentry housing is really, really important, because when people are released, they're released with the hopes of starting and building something new for their lives and changing the direction.
You obviously have been on this trajectory of giving, but I imagine that there are women that you have helped in the last quarter century that are still friends, and do you celebrate their victories, and you're still all very close, and you may not go shopping together, but things are looking good?
We are. Things are looking good. We've had
Did they come back to help you too?
Yes, they come back to help me. They come back to donate. Some of them actually work for us. They come back for help. They come back to give help. It's a really nice community, but I must say, most of the time, I'm seeing what they're doing on Facebook.
So what do you need? What do you need people to do to help you? There's probably big lifts and little lifts and just token anythings. So
we're continuing to build out our services, and we want to be able to sustain our services, so however people can support us. But Christmas is coming up. People can support us for our Christmas drive.
You are absolutely exquisite.
Thank you so much.
Oh no, thank you
for having this conversation. It was good conversation.
You're not kidding. What a treat for me to have the opportunity to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you. With the Department of Building and Safety, Jeff Napier knows how safe every building in LA is and is not. It's been predicted that by the year 2044, there is a 75% chance that LA will incur an earthquake at the 7.1 level. A lot of buildings need to be retrofitted here in Los Angeles. And to explain what buildings need to be retrofitted and how that whole process is taking place, I am delighted to welcome Chief Building Inspector Jeff Napier of the LA Department of Building and Safety. So nice to have you with me.
Hi, Maria. Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Thanks. All right. There is an ordinance on the books that was put in 2015 that is called the Mandatory Earthquake Hazard Reduction in Existing Wood Frame Buildings with Soft, Weak, or Open Front Doors. That's a lot of words. What does that mean?
Yeah, that is. Okay, so for the layperson, you see these older apartment buildings all throughout the city with little poles holding up the upper stories. Those are typically what we would call a soft story building. The definition is 2 stories of wood frame construction with an open, let's say, tuck under parking, right? Or a similar space underneath with open wall lines where we don't have the proper shear paneling and supports to resist the forces of lateral forces in an earthquake. So these are buildings that were designed prior to the building codes of January 1st, 1978. They consist of 2 or more stories of wood framing, and they are 3 units or less are exempt from the program. But that, in a nutshell, is what these buildings are.
So what happens to these buildings in an earthquake that requires an ordinance to have been passed?
So we all know in the Northridge earthquake, these types of buildings did not perform very well. The forces that hit, the buildings were designed to support the vertical loads of the building, but they were not necessarily designed for the lateral or the horizontal forces of an earthquake. So the buildings, top heavy, create a little bit of momentum, and they collapsed onto the lower stories. There were quite a significant loss of life in that earthquake. The building code has adapted, and these buildings need to be upgraded so that they can withstand these forces.
Okay, so that's considered a soft story, but there's this other thing called an open front wall. Is that literally the same building, or is it a different type of building?
Yeah, so what you're looking at when we say an open wall line, so imagine a whole bunch of posts in a row. Normally, in today's code, we would see what we would call shear walls, or walls that would fill in those voids, right? And those resist the lateral forces in a greater capacity. When you have an open wall line, that means that it's literally a row of posts with spaces in between. Those spaces are vulnerable, or the connections from the post to the upper stories are very vulnerable. So what we're doing now is we're strengthening those buildings to absorb those forces.
Okay, so what is the ordinance? What was the ordinance, and what's the time frame? Because there's a huge window, of time that people are able to comply with this.
Right. So the ordinance, what happens if you're to receive an order to comply from the department? That means your building was one of the almost 13,000 buildings in the city that was identified as being
potentially at risk.
Yeah, potentially at risk. Let's put it that way. So you would receive an order to comply. At that point, what the ordinance says is that you have to hire an engineer or an architect licensed in the state of California to perform a structural analysis of the building. That structural analysis will address those connections and whether the building can withstand another earthquake. If the building was built okay as is, those plans are submitted to our department and we'll review that and you'll be okay. Most of the time, these buildings are going to require plans are submitted with a retrofit component to strengthen these buildings up. The public has, or the building owner, I should say, has 2 years in which to submit the plans to the department. Within 3.5 years, they have to obtain the permits to either start the construction or demolish the building, and 7 years to ultimately fully comply.
So what is normally required to retrofit one of these soft story buildings?
In a nutshell, what happens is the contractor comes in, they put in temporary supports to support the upper floors because the weakness is on the lower floor where the tuck under parking, the typical tuck under parking, if you will, is. What they then do is start to do the excavations for the big concrete beam that has to go underneath. Once they get that in place, they call for inspection. There's certain stages of construction that require inspection. It also requires special inspection where we have what we call deputy inspectors that are on site during the construction for quality control. The grade beam is poured. This is what the big concrete foundation is. Big, huge steel I-beams go into the ground. The concrete surrounds those to give you a nice tight connection at the bottom. As you come up, there's a cross member that connects to it. It's welded, bolted, put into place. This is a real nice stiff frame now, if you will, that won't allow the building to shift as much back and forth. Though that element is then connected to the floors above. So the good part about it is the tenants usually aren't significantly impacted. Of course, there's always the noise
Sure.
and the dust that goes with it.
But they don't have to move.
In most cases, in most cases, yeah. I'm sure not in every case. There is a tenant habitability plan that is submitted to the department, to the housing department's guidelines, HCID-LA, Housing Community Investment Department. They have to notify their tenants in writing that there's going to be some construction going on, and they have to provide measures to lessen the effect of the construction for the tenants.
Can you find out yourself, if you're just a tenant, if one of these buildings is on the list that needs to be retrofitted?
Absolutely, you can. You can go on our website, ladbs.org. You would click on the link under the Permit and Inspection Activity Report.
Okay.
In there, you can type in your address. You got to make sure you have the right address. It will bring up information as to whether or not your building is in the program, one, whether or not it's been issued an order to comply and the status of that order, and then third, whether or not it's in full compliance, which means it's received a certificate of compliance.
Is there an opportunity for people to be able to virtually have their properties inspected?
Yeah, there sure is. We have a new program called the Virtual Inspection Program. It's fairly new. It's just sort of taking off, and it allows us, an innovative way for our customers and our inspection staff to obtain timely inspections and, lessen the person-to-person contact. Now, obviously, these are going to be sort of your simpler inspections. This doesn't mean that a 20-story building can be inspected from an office in downtown LA.
Right.
These are going to be smaller ticket items, window replacements, location of smoke detectors. Sometimes the contractor will get a correction. These will be re-inspections of a simple correction that instead of putting an inspector in the car, getting out on the road, it allows us to do a really quick inspection through a real-time live streaming.
So you can actually talk them,
you
talking
talk
them
through
around.
it.
Exactly.
I get a lot of questions from people just in my everyday passings that say, gosh, it must be really hard to get a permit. I want to do this addition to my house, but I'm so scared. I don't know what to do. I can't walk in and get a permit. Well, you certainly can. So we've put safeguards in place to protect the public and our staff that they can come in, drop their plans off at our drop-off centers. For the soft story program, you would need to do that at our Metro office located just down the road at 201 North Figueroa Street.
Okay.
For any other permit, you can go to any of our permit issuing offices. There they'll drop their plans, they'll be given an appointment date. Okay, and on that appointment date and after a brief quarantine of the plans, we usually quarantine the plans for 24 to 48 hours, one of our staff will call the applicant back and start the plan check process. A little bit of back and forth with corrections and emails and things of that nature. You can obtain your permit. Like we said, we have the virtual inspection program running at this time. You can schedule your inspections through our website or through the 311 operator. So, we've faced a lot of challenges during the pandemic, but we've been able to move forward through it, so that's been really good.
All right, so the website for information?
ladbs.org is the website. It's very user-friendly. It's wonderful. I get a lot of feedback from just friends and colleagues that I know. They say it's really easy to navigate. They're really happy with it. You can find pretty much everything we do on that website. You can schedule inspections. You can monitor and follow the progress of your inspections on that site, and there's many other things on there. Virtual inspections is on there.
Well, thank you so much for clarifying and sharing with me all of the information about a whole array of terminology that I had never heard of before. It's
You're
been a
welcome.
great education.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
And that's a wrap on this LA Currents.